Alright, as promised how many weeks ago when I made the first video about animation foundations where we use the animation player, I wanted to continue along the lines of animation. So let's continue with SpriteFrames and AnimatedSprite2Ds. That will be our topic today. Let me just close this off and start a new 2D scene. And let's name this SpriteFrames maybe. And in order to use SpriteFrames, we need to add an animated Sprite 2D. So let's look that up. Let's just put Sprite 2D and see what comes up. So here it is under Node 2D, Animated Sprite 2D. Let's double click that and add it in. You'll see there's a warning here. It says the Sprite frame resource must be created. That's what we have to do here. Let's go on the right hand side under the inspector where it says empty. Click that and add a sprite frame. Okay, so let's save that. Give it the default name, SpriteFrames. And now we need to click Animated Sprite 2D. And you'll see at the bottom here, there's a new tab that says SpriteFrames. If it's not selected, let's say something else is selected, just click the SpriteFrames and you'll get this little window here. So of course now we need some sprites that we can animate. Two ways that you can get these sprites. You can have actual separate pictures that you can load one after the other, create an animated sprite 2D, or you can have a sprite sheet, and then sprite sheet will have a grid of different movements for the sprite that you can just use that single sheet and select the animations that you like. For my first one, I'm going to use the separate sprite to create my animated sprite 2D. I found a free Santa multiple sprites resource at Game Art 2D. I'll put the link up so you can go and peruse and see if you like any of those there. There are free ones that you can use. If you're going to use this on your own program that's going to be commercial, you need to check the agreement to make sure you're not breaking any rules or laws. But I'm just going to use it for the tutorial here. As you can see here, I downloaded santasprite.zip and I already created a folder called sprites in the Godot project folder. Let's just open this up. And as you can see, the SantaSprite has a database where you can probably create your own positions if you like, because you have different body parts. But I'm not going to use that. I'm going to use the PNGs. I want all different positions, and I'm going to extract this PNG to somewhere, this PNG folder to somewhere. Let me just call this, add a new folder and call it Santa so I can find it quickly, and extract it to here. So now I can close this, and I should have a Santa folder in here somewhere at the top. And there's a PNG folder here, and all the sprites are here. So let's choose Santa jumping maybe. All jumps, one, and I click shift and I go to the last jump and it selects in order all those jumps, and I'm going to drag this across to my sprites folder. And as you can see, a little arrow appears in front of the sprites folder. So if you click that now, we have all these in here. You can drag it across here and see what it looks like. Okay, so let's go back into the animated sprite 2D node and make sure sprites frame is selected. And we're going to select all the jump that we want, or all the positions that we want. In this case, it's just jump, but I could have put all the sprites in here and select separately what I want. And let's drag it across into the window here that has the -1+ buttons above. And here, as you can see, all the different sprites are shown in the window. I should have renamed this to jump, but we can leave it as default. It just means that when we're referencing this animation, we have to use the name default. Or we can just click in here and rename it jump. So now we can just reference the name jump. Okay, so now we have our jump sprites in place. Let's just drag this to the center here. We can resize it if we like as well by clicking the little red buttons and dragging them across. And we can actually preview what it looks like so that we can see for frames per second is good. So that seems okay, I guess. It's a little slow. We can probably speed it up. Let's make that about 10 frames per second. That looks better. And we can stop it by pressing the pause stop. We can actually run this right away now. Let's save. If we click the fourth button underneath animations that says autoplay unload, and remember we have to run the current scene because it's not the main scene, and it plays. If we go back into sprite frames and we take off the auto load and we try it again, let's save and run again, nothing happens because it's not loading the animation. Let's add a script so we can actually run it from script. I'm going to click sprite frames, the main node here, add script, create, and let's just save this. And it's a simple code. We can put it on the onReady if we like, the function ready, or we can add a button that every time we press the button it plays. Let's do that. Let's add a button. Let's go back to the 2D scene, and I want to make this a bit smaller, so I'm going to click the scale mode. I'm going to scale this down a bit, and let's move it now, maybe to the top left hand corner, and let's add a button here. Oh, we already have buttons. Okay, so we have the button already selected. Let's go across into the node tab on the right hand side, and let's add the signal for button down and connect, and let's add the signal for button up and connect. So basically when we press down we want it to run, and when we release we want it to stop. Okay, so let's just add a code. The code is pretty simple. Let's remove the pass. We have to reference our animated sprite 2D, so let's just drag it across. AnimatedSprite2D dot play, and this is where it's important to remember the name. You can always go into the sprite frames at the bottom here to remember the name, jump. So let's just type in jump. So when we press the button, it's supposed to start the jump. To stop it, let's drag in the animated sprite again and type stop. And that's it. This will stop any animations that this animated sprite 2D is doing. Let's save this and run. If I press play, it's supposed to jump, and there we go, it's working. And if I release play, it stops. Press again, jumps, stop. So this works fine. Okay, so let's go back to the 2D scene, and I want to add a sprite sheet here. I downloaded another sprite sheet. Unfortunately, I didn't get a sprite sheet with Santa. I could probably make one using programs like Critter or GIMP or one of those programs, or even Inkscape, but that's beyond the scope of this video. So I just decided to look for a completed sprite sheet. It wasn't very good. I got it from Open Game Art. Drag it across. This is the sprite sheet. Let's open it up to see what it looks like. As you can see, a sprite sheet has all the different movements and positions, one after the other. So you'll have to actually select what you want as your animation. Let's close this, and let's drag this across to our sprites folder. Let's just scroll down a bit. Okay, so we have sprite sheet.caveman, and let's go back to the scene tab and click sprite frames, and let's add another animated sprite 2D. Of course, you can name it what you like. I'm just going to leave it as animated sprite 2D 2, and it's going to complain again. So what we're going to do here, let's go back into the inspector. We're going to add a sprite frame again because it's complaining that we don't have any sprite frame. But this time, let's click off and click back on. But this time, when we go into the sprite frames tab, we're not going to drag the picture across. There's a button at the top here in the animation frames that said add frames from sprite sheet, or you can use the shortcut Ctrl+Shift+O. I'm going to click that, and it's going to ask you to find the sprite sheet. Of course, we have it in sprites, and we're going to use this caveman sprite sheet. Let's open that. And now here, it's going to ask you, you can press Control and scroll button to zoom in, and it's going to ask you to choose which frames you want for a specific animation. Remember, we are using default animation here right now. I'll rename it afterwards. If we want to, we can just let it auto slice, but that may not slice it properly. As in this case, it didn't. It just gave us some vertical slices, which is not good. And that's because the sprite sheet is not made properly, and some of the sprites are actually joined to the other sprites. As you can see here, the foot, this foot is probably touching the head here, around here. This one is definitely touching this one here. So that's not ideal. As I said, it's not a very good sprite sheet, but I'm just using it for demonstration purposes. What we can do is we can adjust. There are 4 horizontal cuts and 4 vertical cuts. So let's just type in 4 for the vertical and enter. And as you can see, it attempts to cut it equally. And you can choose what frames you want. If you only wanted these 4 frames, you can just choose those and add those 4 frames for whatever position you're using here. I have it on default. I'm just going to add all the frames. So let's just click the rest and click the sections in order of your animation. If you don't do that, you're going to get your animation looking off. It's going to be jumping, or you may have different animations, and it's not going to look smooth. So I'm just going to select all, since this whole sprite sheet was all about running, the caveman running, and let's add all 16 frames. But as I said, if it's different types of animations, you just select the ones that show your animation, be it running, jumping, sleeping, dying, whatever. You're going to only select the ones for that animation that you want the sprite sheet section for. And let's click add frames, and it's going to add all the frames here. This is different from the other one. It's just adding these sections here for you. And I'm going to rename this to run. And it's going to use these sprites here now, whichever ones you selected, to do the run. So let's, as you can see, the sprite is really small here. So let's raise it a bit so you can see it. Let's just drag it across. Widen it up a bit. And if we click play, let's scroll in, and if you click play just to view it, you can see the little man is running. Let's stop that. Of course, you can auto load again, but let's just use the code and bind it to the same play button. Let's save this, Control save, and let's go into script, and same thing, you drag across the animated sprite 2D. There's supposed to be a tab here, dot play, and the name of this animation in this animated sprite 2D. Remember, the animated sprite 2D can have different animations here. This could have run, you can have run here, and you can add another one here and call it jump 2, and you can add whatever sections we wanted. You can add sleep or whatever the animation is, and add whatever sections of pictures we wanted here. But we only have pictures for run, so we're just going to use the run, because this animated sprite 2D 2, or even this animated sprite 2D, can have several animations in them depending on how many pictures you use for each animation. We have run here, and we're just going to enter run, and same thing here again. Let's drag it across, and we're going to stop this animation 2D2. And there we go. That's the finished code. Let's run it. As you can see, nothing is happening. You can see a cutoff of the sprite below, because remember when we sliced it, it wasn't too clean. If we click play, Santa is jumping and Caveman is running. If we release, it stops, and that works fine. So that's how we do the animated sprite 2D, also known as sprite frames. Let's close this off. And of course, I want to point out a few things here. If we go to the sprite frames tab at the bottom, all these there are so many different buttons here that you can use. We already met the add animation. You can actually duplicate that animation. So if you want the same animation and you just want to make a few tweaks, or you just want to have the same animation and give it a different name, you can do that. You can delete an animation. That's these animations here. You could actually filter the animations as in search for them here. You can loop the animation, or you can remove the loop so that it just plays once. You can change the frames per second to speed it up or slow it down. You can look at how it plays backwards. You can actually play the animation backwards from the end back to the beginning. You can stop. You can play from the start to the end. You can just play from the whatever position you're on. If it's 0, 1, 2, wherever, it's going to play from there. You can add a new frame from file. We met the sprite sheet already. Add in a sprite sheet. You can actually copy frames and paste them. Let's say you're doing some editing and you want a skip jump sort of behavior. You can actually add frames and prolong certain positions. Let's say like when he's running and his 2 feet are off the ground, you can actually copy and paste it and move it in between here to give it the illusion that he's floating in the air for a bit. You can actually insert an empty before whichever frame is selected. You can insert one after. You can move frame left or right using these buttons. And of course, you can delete a frame from this lineup that you have here. Frame duration lets you know how long it's going to be in one loop. And right now we have it for 1 second, but you can change that as you like. These are the extras I wanted to mention. I hope this was informative and helps you on your journey to using animated sprite 2Ds. And see you in the next one.